Welcome. Thank you for lending an ear to the Voice of the Times for Friday, March 12, 2021. For today's editorial, no need for strict lockdown despite COVID-19 case rise, Palace. The Palace spokesman Harry Roque Jr. issued the most consequential and truest statement of administration policy on the pandemic when he declared on Wednesday that there was no need for the country to be placed under a stricter lockdown regime even if COVID-19 cases were rising. There is a huge difference between a COVID-19 policy pronouncement by Malacanang and a policy pronouncement by the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases, or IATF-ERD. President Duterte is the head of the Executive Department of Government and the chief policymaker in response to the pandemic. The IATF-ERD is only a task force and advisory arm of the President on COVID-19 matters. It is not a regular agency of the government. It is only an ad hoc committee cobbled together from the cabinet. It does not make policy. By an odd circumstance, Mr. Roque is spokesman of both the President and the IATF-ERD. It does not require much analysis to realize that a policy statement carries more weight and significance than a task force statement. Roque was being asked if a shift to the stricter Enhanced Community Quarantine or ECQ or its modified version MECQ was necessary given the rising number of coronavirus infections. He said there would be no reason to close down businesses again and another lockdown would not be good for the economy. Truth to be told, we can no longer take a lockdown. So many are going hungry. So our appeal is to take care of ourselves so that we could earn a living, he said. The Department of Trade and Industry has recommended the reopening of movie houses and leisure arcades in places on General Community Quarantine or GCQ to help boost efforts to revive the economy. Metro Manila mayors, however, have resisted, insisting that the movie houses and leisure arcades remain closed to prevent further spread of the virus. Roque explained the decision on what quarantine levels to prescribe was based on data, and the data showed that hospital capacity has remained adequate to cope with the pandemic situation. Of 1,900 ICU or intensive care unit beds, 60% were still available, while 65% of 30,500 isolation beds remained unoccupied. If we don't have enough ICU beds, then that's the time we will change our quarantine classifications, Roque said in an interview with state-run Radyo Pilipinas. Let us say that the number of cases is rising, but we can also see that we are ready to treat those who would be seriously ill, which would be 2 to 3% of those who would be infected, he said. On Monday, the number of new COVID-19 cases exceeded the 3,000 mark for the fourth consecutive day, bringing the total of cases to more than 597,000. Critics of the government's pandemic response do not believe that the country needs to be placed on a stricter quarantine level if health protocols were strictly implemented and the COVID-19 vaccination drive that has already started were to pick up speed. They complained that the IATF-ERD appears to be using the daily count of new cases and infections as the reason behind its repeated renewal of the community quarantine or lockdown throughout the country. This has produced for the country the dubious distinction of having the longest and never-ending lockdown in the whole world. More worrisome, the task force has named a functionary in the person of a COVID-19 testing czar to handle the task of producing an ever-rising stream of new COVID-19 cases or infections. Our testing system has not acknowledged the high number of false positives being produced by the PCR test, which is an anomaly deplored around the world. Meanwhile, there is in our midst a research team, Octa Research, that specializes in issuing alarmist warnings about the pandemic. Its latest warning is that the Philippines might see 5,000 to 6,000 new COVID-19 cases per day by the end of March. When that date falls due, the government should hold them to account. Metro Manila is on GCQ for the month of March, as are Baguio City, Apayao, Kalinga, Mountain Province, Batangas, Tacloban City, Iligan City, Davao City, and Lanao del Sur. The rest of the country is on the least prohibitory modified general community quarantine, or MGCQ. And that's the editorial for March 12, 2021. For more news and information, get a copy of the Manila Times on print. Subscribe to its digital edition or log on to www.manilatimes.net. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and listen to the Voice of the Times.